How's it going, everybody? This is Cameron White with White Light Astrology, and welcome back to your favorite weekly horoscope, What the Fuck is Going On in the Universe, for April 8th through April 15th of 2019. Thank you guys so much for being here and liking and sharing and commenting and subscribing. I love and appreciate every single one of you guys. I'm so glad you guys can be here this week because we have quite a lot going on this week, as well as next week too. However, this week it's going to start to feel like a little bit more of clarity, a little bit more of understanding of what's going on. You know, Mercury's been in Pisces for, it's almost been 2 months now, and so it's left a lot of confusion. It's left a lot of, stuff is a good way to put it. And this week, we're going to have, what are this week's highlights? We have Venus conjoining Neptune this week. This is going to be really important, and only because when I was talking about Neptune and Mercury conjoining Neptune, there was a lot of confusion, a lot of fog, and that's because Mercury's in detriment in Pisces. Like, Mercury doesn't work well there, and Neptune's not helping it at all. Venus conjoining Neptune's a lot different though, because this is Venus's exalted sign. Venus loves to be in Pisces, and she can handle Neptunian things a little bit better than Mercury can. So I will give this more of the, I don't want to say the benefit of the doubt, but I got a lot of flack for saying Neptune's like a little bit negative, and at times it is, but I think Venus being right here this week is going to be really powerful and really awesome to see. This is Venus's exalted sign. She loves to be here. Neptune is, kind of like saturating the colors and making this more of a brighter picture, so I think that's going to be fun. This week we also have, what's the next thing going on? We have Jupiter stationing retrograde this week. That's also going to be really important because Jupiter's going to be retrograde just about the whole summer. And the whole, it's not like a Mercury retrograde where it's like, when is this going to end? Jupiter retrograde is kind of like more of a turning point in the story for Jupiter, and that's going to be happening this week. But of course, I talk all about that in my April horoscopes if you guys haven't checked that out already. However, the other big thing that we've got going on, we have Mercury squaring Jupiter for the last and final time while it's been in Pisces. So this is going to really, kind of bring us all back to when before even Mercury went retrograde, when Mercury was still in Pisces and, before it went to that last degree and went retrograde. And then this week we also have the Sun trining Jupiter. This weekend, what is it? That's on Sunday. Yeah, when we go into Sunday, we're actually going to have the Sun trining Jupiter as it's retrograde. The Moon's going to be trining it too. The Sunday actually looks like really positive. And as well as when we get into next week on Monday, when we have Venus squaring Jupiter as well. This is going to be kind of like saturating the colors a little bit more and also giving more of a better perception of vision. I've been using that word vision a lot this past couple of weeks because Mercury is in Pisces on top of Neptune. That's working with images, that's working with pictures, and I think Venus, after it leaves its conjunction with Neptune this week, once we start off the week with that, and then later on squares Jupiter, I think this is getting a clear vision of what the image is supposed to look like. So that's kind of what this week's highlights are. And dude, this week is going to be, kind of a lot going on. And as well as next week, we got even more stuff going on. And I really feel like these next 2 weeks are really going to kind of I don't want to say paint a picture. However, we're really going to start to change from that Pisces energy of a little bit lost, a little bit confused. Things aren't really making sense. And we really have to kind of dive deeper into ourselves versus within the next 2 weeks, things are going to start to really catch up to pace. Things are going to start moving in a different, not in a completely different direction, but there's going to be some change going on. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the horoscope. So today, on Monday, April 8th, just like we talked about last week, we have the Moon entering Gemini and making a conjunction to Mars. This is kind of starting off the week a little bit more, not necessarily chaotic, but a little bit more spread out, a little bit more fast-paced than usual. When we have the Moon going into Gemini, this is more of an emotional focus on hey, what are our thoughts? How can we trace things? How can we understand things a little bit better? And as the Moon conjoins Mars, Mars is about, severing and cutting. He inflammates and angers things sometimes. However, Mars is also our general direction. It's kind of what are we doing with this information now that Mars is in Gemini, the Moon's in Gemini? It's going to be, and that's basically all that's really going on Monday. But as we go into Monday, as things start to pick up pace a little bit more, the big thing that I wanted to mention with the Moon being in Gemini and Mars being Gemini is let's look at Mercury still. Mercury's still in Pisces. Mercury's still in its shadow. It's still working its way through. While Mercury's still in Pisces this time and later on as it squares Jupiter this week, I think this is a little bit more of an understanding of the information that we've been getting with Mercury being retrograde, with, Venus being in Pisces. All the stuff that we've had in Pisces, the Moon in Gemini being on top of Mars right here, I think this is looking at it in a lot more clearer way and just trying to get the best information that we can out of it. However, as we move into Tuesday on April 9th, we are going to have Venus conjoin Neptune. And, I hit on this in the beginning because Venus in Pisces is like, we're talking about the planet of value and connection. She's wanting to bring experiences. She's wanting to have you enjoy whatever it is that you enjoy. And, Venus in Pisces can do her magic. Things can definitely still be weird, but not necessarily bad. More of just different and unique experiences, something that's a little bit more soulful, something that's a little bit more artistic in nature. It's very subjective in understanding. It's not necessarily an objective view. It's a good way to put it. Now, as Venus is on top of Neptune, I kind of want to use this phrase again. Neptune is kind of like saturating these colors. Neptune, it's really easy for Neptune to kind of contort an image and, make things not necessarily fuzzy or it can do a little bit blurry. I don't want to say fuzzy because it's a weird term to use, but like saturated the colors. Like I kind of use if you guys know your memes at all, like a deep fried meme, like that's like Neptune. Like it's very saturated, it's very heavy. But with Venus being on top of it, I want you guys to kind of look at things through a couple different ways. And that's one, like, what are you enjoying right now and what is being called out to you? Like Neptune is, again, a planet of spirituality, of like, what is your sense of idealism? What are the pictures that you're painting in your head? Where are you wearing rose-colored glasses in life? And it's important to wear those. Like, it's important to see things through this, artistic and idealistic way sometimes. It really helps, it helps. I don't even have to explain why that helps, but while Venus is on top of Neptune, experience that. But the other thing that I want you guys to really look at with Venus being on top of Neptune is that sense of idealism, that sense of what picture that you've created with Venus being in this beautiful sign where she can kind of experience and express a little bit more freely and openly. What aren't you attracted to anymore? It's kind of like Venus in Pisces is kind of like, you could see things through all these different ways, but there's also going to be something, especially when it's on top of Neptune, that, isn't as pretty as you wanted it to be. Or maybe it's just a little bit more deceiving or a little bit more, illusionary than usual. Like, it's not about choosing one or the other, but it's about going, I see this and this is how I feel. And let your feelings kind of take control of the boat. Not necessarily make, emotionally, what's the word I'm looking for? Like charged decisions and actions. But while Venus is on top of Neptune, like, what are you feeling? What do you want? What does that mean? Where are you going with that? And Venus in Pisces, it doesn't have to be tangible. It doesn't have to be the specific thing. It's just about going, what do I want right at this moment? What is right for me in this moment? What experiences, what environment is going to be crucial for me? And what is it that I want to bring value into? What is it that I want to express value with? What is it that I want to have fun with? That's kind of like Venus's whole MO. However, as well, on Tuesday, we are going to have the moon squaring Venus. And as the moon squares Venus in Gemini, this is, again, more understanding of this on a more literal level. It's kind of like, Pisces is kind of like the storyteller. Like, when your grandparents tell you an old story, Gemini is kind of like a summary of that story. And while the moon's in Gemini, trying to get like, what were the key points in that story? What were the key points of that Venus on top of Neptune experience that you had? Moon squaring Venus is kind of like, hey, this is the picture that's being painted. This is what I'm seeing out of it and what works and what doesn't work anymore. So then, as we move forward into Wednesday, we have Jupiter stationing retrograde, and we have the Sun squaring Saturn. And I think this is going to be important because, it's really interesting how we have Jupiter in Sagittarius, Saturn in Capricorn right now, Venus in Pisces. There's a lot of planets in their favorite signs to be in. The Sun's also in its exaltation of Aries as well. Now, with the Sun squaring Saturn, this is kind of like, the Sun's in Aries. It's kind of like, what are we initiating? What are we starting? Spring is here, or if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, fall is here. What are we initiating? What are we changing? What is going to be brought up? What is going to be brought into light? And as Saturn's squaring it, where Saturn's like, what are the limitations? What are the blockades in your way? This is kind of like painting more of a picture of if you want to, how do I say this? Not necessarily obtain like the things that you want or anything like that. It's more of like, what is it that we're initiating and what's stopping us from doing that? What are the literal walls? Like, how can we be literal about it? How can we be realistic about it? And that's like the Sun squaring Saturn, but with Jupiter retrograde, stationing retrograde on that day as well, this is really kind of like an internal look at like these walls that can kind of confine you and these barriers and these borders and these limitations that can be imposed on you. What beliefs do you have to change about yourself, or where do you have to dig deeper into your faith, into hope, into believing something more? How much more deeper do you need to dig into that in order to believe that you can get over those boundaries, that you can, push back those barriers, that you can get over those limitations? And as well, with Saturn being also about like, authenticity, being like having, not necessarily leadership, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, discipline. being more mature about things. This is kind of like Jupiter retrograding with the Sun square Saturn thing is like, hey, if this is the discipline I need to enact on myself, what beliefs do I need to change about myself in order to have that discipline, in order to have that structure, in order to be that serious? And I really think that Wednesday is going to be kind of like a light bulb for some people, really kind of like, this is what I need to change about myself. This is where I need to do deeper inner reflection work. And then this is how I can face adversity. And this is how I can face challenges by working on that, by changing your beliefs, by making, it's kind of like, what's the good way to put it? Like, not necessarily, I don't want to say set yourself up for success, because that's kind of like always given, set yourself up for success, but it's more of like, what are you wanting? Like, if you want to do these things, what do you have to change about your beliefs? Where do you have to kind of like, hey, I don't believe this right now, but I want to believe that. I want to be that person. So you kind of have to like work with changing that at the moment. It's kind of hard to explain, but I think you guys are picking up what I'm putting down. So as we move into Thursday though, on April 11th, Thursday is kind of interesting because we're going to have the moon go into Cancer. We're going to have Mercury squaring Jupiter. Sorry, I'm like looking down right now. And yeah, that's basically it. So Mercury squaring Jupiter and the moon's entering Cancer. The only thing I really wanted to hit on with Mercury squaring Jupiter, since I talked about this in my Mercury retrograde video, and I feel like I don't really need to explain anything more with it. Jupiter's now retrograde and it's squaring Mercury, where again, this has a little bit more of like, we're unveiling the truth a little bit more, where Mercury and Pisces can be a little bit more, I'm not seeing things clearly, this isn't making sense to me. Jupiter making that square, that third and final square, is like, this is what the truth is, and I have to reflect on what that means, even if I don't understand what that truth is. That's Jupiter retrograde squaring Mercury and Pisces. It's like, this is kind of like the truth, and you may not understand it right now, but this is a time for you to dive deeper into that. Go like, hey, what does this really mean for me? What is this really looking like? And it may not be exactly the situation that you were expecting, but it's just a time to go, well, this is what it is, and so this is what I got to reflect on it. And as the moon moves into Cancer on Thursday as well, now that the moon's out of Gemini, moving into Cancer, this is kind of like the sense of, I hate to use the word emotion so much, but it's like you have this moon about, it's the light that, shines what we don't always see. It shines the dark. It brings light to those areas. And this is its ruling sign of Cancer, where it's like, it can feel protected. It can feel nurtured. It wants to shield. It wants to, grow things. It wants to like bring everything into a group hug. And so when you have the moon going into Cancer, I feel like during all of this time, like during this inner reflection stuff, while we're thinking about all this stuff, like, how does that make us feel? What do we need to nurture? What do we need to protect? What do we need to give more to? And so as we move forward, that's basically Thursday, April 11th. But as we move forward into Friday on April 12th, this is when things are going to get a little bit interesting. So on Friday, we're going to have the moon going on top of the north node. We're going to have the sun in between the nodes, squaring the nodes. And then we're also going to have, the moon opposing Saturn too, which isn't really, it's kind of just bringing a little bit more emphasis to this. But as the sun squares the nodes, as we're right in the middle in between eclipse seasons, the ones that we had in January versus the ones that we're going to have in July. This is kind of like the turning point of the story of the nodes. Like, what we're initiating right here, where we're feeling called to and drawn to right here, is going to really it's going to show itself here in a couple, like in a month or two, or not a month or two, in a couple months when we have these eclipses in July. So it's really important that you look at, what is that, on Friday, on April 12th, like, what is it that you're initiating? What is it that you're being called to? While the moon's on top of the north node, you're like, I really need these things. This is what I'm feeling like I need right now. This is where I need to protect myself. This is where I need to nurture myself. This is what really matters to me right now. The sun's going to be in between the nodes, where it's like, it's still in Aries. What are we initiating? What are we charged up about? What are we, trying to bring light to and, feel that solar energy with? And I really think Friday is going to be important. It's not necessarily not going to be important that day, but we're going to see a lot of the things that we initiate or that happen on that day play out later on in a couple months with the eclipses. Now, as we move forward into this weekend, though, on Saturday, we're going to have the moon going into Leo. It is going to square Uranus. Not the biggest deal in the world, but as the moon goes into Leo, this is kind of like, all right, now that we have Jupiter in Sagittarius, Sun in Aries, there's a lot of fire energy going on. This is very inspirational. This is very exciting. This is kind of like, soul level stuff, like, intuitive level stuff of like, I'm feeling called out to this direction. This is where the fire's taking me. Like, the wind's kind of changing direction, so the fire's going to burn somewhere else. And as the moon goes into Leo and squares Uranus, this is kind of like, you gotta have to get creative. You gotta have to get out of your comfort zone, that Uranus and Taurus energy, when it comes to, you know, feeling not necessarily just confident, but while the moon's in Leo, after all of this stuff that happens this week, like, you know, what are we feeling excited about? What are we wanting to bring into light, into attention? What are we wanting to entertain? What are we wanting to feel inspired for? What are we trying to feel good about ourselves with? Like, this is the sun in Aries and the moon in Leo. Like, it is about you this time. Like, how are you feeling? Are you excited? Is this going to be good for you? Is this what you deserve? And this is going to be a big time to work on, like, you know, pushing back those barriers. Jupiter stationing retrograde. What do you believe about yourself? Like, how much do you believe you're worthy of all that stuff? And this is a time to say yes to that stuff. Now, as we move forward into Sunday, we're going to have the sun trining Jupiter exactly at 24 degrees. We're going to have the moon trining Jupiter, trining the sun. We're going to have, and that's basically it. It's just a grand fire trine day of like, hey, we're moving forward. We're initiating things. Things are changing. We're starting to work on these beliefs about ourselves. We're starting to feel more confident, feel more inspired, and feel more, you know, have more leadership and control over our lives and what we're doing. So this is really exciting stuff as we go into the weekend. And then as we go into Monday, we're going to have Venus squaring Jupiter as we start next week, and we're going to have the moon going into Virgo. So as Venus squares Jupiter, this is kind of important because, you know, Venus is in Pisces. We're playing with images. We're playing with we're looking at what we want to express, and, you know, it's kind of like, instead of just getting a coloring book where, you know, you have lines to work with, it's like you have a blank page and all of the colors in the world that you can think of. What are you creating? Now, Jupiter being retrograde squaring Venus right here is kind of like, again, if you want this image to come to fruition, where do you have to set your sails? What vision do you need to be in line with? Where is your target versus where is your aim? And are you shooting for that? What is it going to take for you to get to that? What is it going to take for you to hit that target the way that you want it to? And it's kind of like, you know, it's not necessarily a fine point target like a bullseye. This is kind of like a general direction. This is kind of like, you know, an image that you want to create, a vibe, as to say, that you might want to create. And I think as Venus squares Jupiter, this is like, what is that truth of like, what image can you paint? What image do you want to paint? And what is it going to take for you to manifest that in order for that environment to come alive? And that's how we start off next week. And next week is really important because we have Mercury leaving shadow and entering Aries next week. We have the sun going into Taurus. We have full moon in Libra, number two. We have Venus going into Aries. We have, and then by the time we start next week, we have the sun conjoining Uranus. There's so much going on next week. And this week is kind of like the snowball gets a little bit bigger and that momentum carries this week. So this week, like, you know, my biggest advice would probably be just like, feel it, experience it. There's going to be some clarity this week, even if it doesn't seem like it. And pick up what you have. Like, you know, you're not going to be getting everything that you need, but what's there, pick it up and use it to your best ability. And that's what I got for you guys. So thank you guys so much for watching and liking and sharing and commenting and subscribing. I love and appreciate every single one of you guys, and I'll be seeing you next week.